What's going on, everyone? Today we're here with Nicolette Machile. She's out of South Africa. She's joining us today to speak to us about many different subjects that's very, very important. She can give us a lot of information that many of you have been asking about South Africa. Now, Nicolette is on YouTube as well. She is a financial expert. I watched a lot of her videos, very, very good produced content. She's a host of TV shows. She's an actress. She's all over the place. Like I said, and anybody that's busy, that's a good thing. It's very productive. So, Nicolette, thank you for joining us on the show today.
Thank you so much for having me all the way from South Africa.
Yeah. So, in South Africa, what city did you out of?
So currently I live in Johannesburg, which is kind of like our business kind of hub. This is like where all the hustlers, if I may call it that, live and try and make their money. But originally I'm from a rural area in a province called Mpumalanga. So that was home. But yeah, I am kind of residing in Johannesburg. I've now bought my home and everything in Johannesburg.
So, I was reading that you went to college for communications, correct?
Yes, after I failed my law degree, by the way.
Oh, okay. So you were trying to become a lawyer. So how did you feel after that failure? Because a lot of times when people fail, it breaks them down and put them in a space where they feel like they can't do anything. So how did you bounce back from that?
So I think I bounced back because, to be quite honest, law wasn't really my passion. Can I tell you why I wanted to do law? I actually wanted to do law because I used to watch quite a lot of Boston Legal, but only to find out when I went to university that our legal system and framework is very different from the United States one. So while you guys have like a jury system, we work more on case law. So we've got lawyers and they got to deliberate amongst themselves. And the first time I went to a moot trial, it was so boring. I was like, no, I can't do this. So I think because what I was studying was not really my first choice and my passion, I did it because coming from a very traditional Black family, you're expected to follow certain career streams that are secure and that are high paying. So I ended up leaving my university and coming up to Johannesburg because I was studying in Grahamstown. And my father said something very interesting to me after I left. He said to me, one day your friends are going to outclass you. They're going to say, let's go on holiday, and you're going to have to come to me for money to be able to pay for your vacation. And I think that for me was really the turning point. That's when I realized that I've hit rock bottom and you can't get lower than rock bottom. So the only way is either on sideways or up. So I think that really is what pushed me. And it was good. I was quite spoiled when I was in university. My dad literally did everything for us. I didn't study via any type of financial assistance. My dad paid for everything. And I think that made me take him for granted and take my opportunities to study for granted. So after that, when the well kind of dried up, it was time for me to stand on my own 2 feet. And I think that really helped.
Yeah, because a lot of times as parents, you want to do everything you can for your kids. You want them to have a better life than what you had, and
Yeah.
it seems to me that when you try to give your children a better life, they just take it for granted, like, oh, that's just one of those things they're
Yeah.
accustomed to. Until, like you said, until you hit rock bottom, you realize, oh man, daddy was really working hard to send me to school.
Yeah, and I think what you start to realize is actually that life is not as easy as you are, or as you've been accustomed to, right? Because you go around everything, you got a meal every single day, and I was in boarding school, so I had a very systematic life and everything. I never really saw the background scenes of how hard my parents had to work for everything that I had. So the moment I failed, that's when I realized, because I had to spend some time at home, and that's when I realized that, you know what, there's actually so much more that's going on behind that I don't see, that allows me to live the life that I've got. Yeah.
So you got your communications degree. So you also an actress. So did you get some sort of acting training while in college, or you got that outside of college?
Look, I think I think my acting just comes from my personality, to be quite honest. I never got any acting training. I actually got more TV presenting and talk show hosting training, because that is what I actually do. When I went for my audition to be an actress, it was actually for a cameo role. and the role that they had asked me to audition for, I never got. But they called me like a week later to offer me a different role. So I think acting is not really my first love. So, but I mean, for me, it's one of those things where if you're gonna do something, you gotta do it well. So I only got acting training after I actually got the role, and because you get given obviously a lead time before you start shooting. So I did quite extensive training with one of Dorothy Gold. She's one of the leading trainers in the country, and yeah, that's how I ended up training.
So you also, heavily into finance, and you was breaking a lot of things down in South Africa in the area of finance. Um, so I want to ask you a question about that. Let's say, the American, brother like myself, if we wanted to get involved with starting a business or maybe even purchasing a home. Can American citizens do that just as a foreigner, or you have to partner with someone within South Africa to do that?
A lot of people that are not South African or don't have permanent residency in South Africa generally follow the suit of partnering with someone. I think it just makes the life a little bit easier for you. It makes also the legislation a little bit easier. But there are ways in which you can go around it in terms of buying, especially property. On the business side, it's a little different. You can register, obviously, with your passport, but they do make it a little bit difficult for you because I think also for tax purposes, it's very difficult for South Africa to manage the money going out and money coming back into the country. So you could definitely invest in property. You could invest in our stock exchange, but the best way is to partner with somebody who is South African. And a lot of people have done that. I don't know if it's a good thing because what they usually do is then they'll get a silent partner. And, it becomes a bit difficult when money goes out of the country to regulate those kind of tax implications. But as long as the business is registered under the CIPC, you should be fine.
So who can you trust? I mean, because like you said, if a person say, okay, well, I got to get a partner. Well, how would I know I won't get hustled by no one? I mean, is there certain like entities there that say, listen, you can do your investments through us because we're a trusted company?
Look, there are different companies. So, for instance, we've got a lot of. If you let's talk now, just maybe buying of stocks, right?
Right.
We do have stockbrokers. So we've got a stockbroking platform called Easy Equities that works really well because everything there that you do is done by you. I know that they kind of struggling right now with their FICA in terms of getting people outside of South Africa to be registered. I know that they're working towards that, but there are other stockbroking platforms like Tebe, the likes of PSG, the likes of Ellen Gray that you could get involved in. I stand to be corrected in terms of how would you register as a foreign national, but it is easily available to you. And then in terms of buying property, obviously you're going through the various agencies, which are quite legit, but obviously you got to stick to the ones that everybody knows, the one that is registered. Also on CIPC, you can check if a company's registration is legit and if they are within compliance. So you can check both on our subs page, which is the South African Revenue Services. You can check a director's name. So there are entities in which you can do your due diligence. And then I know that I've got a lot of friends, if I may call it that do business consulting, if I may call it that, right? So they will be able to channel you to the right people, depending obviously in what kind of way you would like to invest in South Africa.
So what is the minimum amount you suggest to come, like say you want to invest into something in US dollars? Like what would be the minimum amount to get started?
So what specifically would you be looking into investing? Are we talking property, stocks?
It could be property, it could be stocks, it could be business startups, it could be media. Like at least for us, it's media. I'm all about media, and I saw you have a separate company yourself that starts or buy media outlets, correct?
Yes, so I do community media buying. So let me talk property because property for me is the one easiest way that I've got experience in, right? So our property in South Africa is, I may call it, there's three different types of property spaces in which you can move into. So one, we've got the rural type of property, which is a very big, it's in demand because South Africa has got a serious housing challenge, right? So a lot of people, what they do is they go and buy stands in the rural areas and they develop those and build semi great quality type of housing. This is to obviously assist the government in terms of providing good quality housing, if you may call it that, right? Then you've got that other area in which we've got a very big problem is student accommodation. So we're looking for very innovative ways in which we can build student accommodation. A lot of companies now are moving to what do you call those containers, because also what we have is a space issue. So I don't know if you've heard, we've got a very big land issue in South Africa. Everybody's crying about land. Everybody wants the land to go back to who it originally belonged to. So we've got a lot of, our constitution is being amended currently to allow land reform in terms of expropriating land without any compensation to the current people who are holding the title deeds of our land. So we've also got a land issue. So in terms of moving into the space area or the housing or property area, you need to be very, very innovative in terms of how you're going to assist the government in creating or providing housing, right? And then the third way or the third option that you've got is obviously your residential housing, which is kind of dominated by the big boys, the likes of Summercon, the likes of Bowen Properties, Renpop, a whole lot of different property development guys. Then in terms of our media, South African media currently is really, it's owned by a lot of the traditional white male dominated type of spaces. But what is happening currently, we've got a young lady who's actually just gotten a license to start her own TV channel. So there's a lot of young people that are moving into the media and the media space side. But again, it is quite heavily, I won't say it's heavily regulated or heavy legislated. It's heavily dominated by a certain group of people for you to get into the really good media spaces, right? But what a lot of South Africans are also now moving into is, what do you call it? What do you call the Netflix and the Showmaxes?
Yeah,
On demand.
Yeah, streaming
On
services.
demand. Yes, the streaming services. So we are looking for that. We don't have a traditionally South African one or an African one in actual fact. We are currently depending on Netflix and Showmax. And then what DSTV has done is that they've created a thing called Catch Up, which is where you would then go and catch up some of your series. I know that we've got a few guys, the likes of Thomas Gomete, who have started their own streaming services. But again, it's a lack of content that is kind of killing that space. But I think South Africa is catching up. You must also understand, we are very, our digital penetration is not as great as it should be in comparison to countries like Kenya, where you've got a very huge digital penetration. Obviously not at the rate of, your first world countries like America, but in comparison to other African states, we're doing pretty okay. But you still have a very big digital divide. So I think South Africa is sitting at 21%, if I could be very wrong, 21% of digital penetration. So it also just gives you an indication of what type of media business you could potentially start. We're still a very big country in terms of mass communication. So radio is still big in South Africa. Mainstream TV is still big in South Africa. The likes of newspapers, print. We just had one of the biggest, my heart breaks, the biggest black-owned media houses closed down. They're closing down in January. I mean, this was a media house that turned out traditionally black information media, giving black actresses, black celebrities an opportunity to be, put on covers, giving us relevant information for us. So it just goes to show you, and one of the reasons why, and it's the company is called Ndalo Media. One of the reasons why it one of the reasons they've cited for their closure is printed. So I used to work in a company. So I used to work in an advertising agency before, and one of the things that I really used to note was the fact that we don't have a printing company in South Africa that can assist, your black magazines, your black newspapers. So what they end up doing is they end up depending on a company called Caxton. And unfortunately, Caxton is owned by the big white boys. So they can charge whatever prices. They control the space. That's why I say it's not necessarily heavily regulated and heavily legislated, but it's heavily dominated by a minority group of people. So the other thing that I think that we definitely need in media is really content hubs. We don't have a lot of content hubs. Our information access is very limited to those who have access to smartphones, and data is very expensive in this country. So we also have a data issue. So you will find that a lot of people, which is a huge amount of people in South Africa that live within the rural areas, don't have access to a lot of things because of the data issue, because of the smartphone issue. So access again becomes a serious issue. So I think the one thing that we definitely need are content hubs. So this kind of interview that you and I are having will probably be seen by people that are living in the urban areas, in the likes of Johannesburg, Cape Town, and never by the people who really need it, you know?
Right. So basically, what you're telling me is South Africa is kind of what it used to be here in the United States. Like we still have mainstream TV, but like I said, terrestrial, we call it terrestrial radio.
Yeah.
People, we don't listen to it too much. It's more so like an XM satellite radio now that people listen to because you drive anywhere in the U.S., you got the signal. Most people get their news now through the smartphone. Or watch programs like YouTube instead of watching your CNNs, your Al Jazeera's, or whatever else that you have. Well, over there you have SABC. They're kind of not relevant as much anymore. So what you're telling me is that if someone come over and start setting up the new wave of what we're doing like here in America, then man, it's going to be just endless possibility.
It really will. It will absolutely blow up. I see a lot of Americans will come into the country and collaborate with the big guys. You know, they'll collaborate with the guys that are really well known. They'll collaborate with the well-established production houses. But there's a great opportunity to collaborate with the smaller guys because for me, the smaller guys understand the grassroots dynamics. They know what kind of content to be pushing out. You said something very, very important. The likes of SABC. SABC is a government-owned TV station, right? So SABC still has the numbers because obviously it's funded by the state. So it has established itself across the country in terms of creating regional offices across the country. So if you are coming into, and then the rival of SABC is obviously DSTV, right? But DSTV's premium is so high that it makes it inaccessible to a lot of people. So you almost need to stay within that space of SABC and DSTV and set up some sort of content hub that will allow people to have access to information, access to relevant information, right? I've visited America quite often, and I see that you guys have, I don't know what to call it. You guys will have a different what do you call it? So you guys will have a different television channel for each region that you've got. So for
Yes.
instance, yes, you see. So we don't have that. We've got what we call community television stations, but because they're not well funded, they're not really producing the type of content that people should really be consuming. So a lot of people, what they do is they will default then to the SABC, and a lot of people, because they can't afford DSTV, will just end up watching SABC. What DSTV then did is DSTV then created different packages. So they've got what we call premium, then they've got compact, and they've got all sorts of different types of little packages. But they still they're not attractive to the people that are in the rural areas. Why? Because let me give you an example. If it rains today, there is no DSTV. You're not going to see anything because it kills the network or the satellite or whatever it is, it blocks it. So we really need a lot of, the streaming services, which we don't have. Showmax was heavily advertised in South Africa, and then Netflix came in and changed the game. But again, our Netflix that we have is not the same Netflix that you guys have, right? So
Right.
it's quite limited content. I mean, I log on to Netflix and I'm like, oh my goodness, I've seen all these shows. I don't want to watch any of these shows. So that's what we're kind of having to deal with in terms of our media. I think there's a great opportunity, especially for YouTube. A lot of South Africans are starting to realize that there is something else on the other side of YouTube, right? They're starting to realize that there are opportunities that they can actually tap into. But again, for instance, when I started my journey, I started with a Facebook page. And my Facebook page currently sits on, I think, just over 200,000 followers, right? But I can't seem to be able to convert those people to YouTube. Why? Because a lot of South Africans find YouTube to be far more data consuming than Facebook. So, and also YouTube requires you to now have an email address for you to be able to start your own account on YouTube. So it just becomes dynamics just throw a lot of our people off. So in as much as we are entering the fourth industrial revolution, it's not really a revolution for all of us if we don't give people access. So there's a great opportunity there in terms of coming into the country and really just changing that landscape.
Yeah, I mean, so I'm just listening to you talk, and I'm just hearing, okay, you know, you need a smartphone in every hand. I'm looking, listening, and if someone can come in and lay in fiber optic internet, if you get fiber optic, or at least minimum broadband, right?
Yeah,
'Cause yeah, because what's happening is when you say when it rains too much, you lose the signal because they run off a satellite. That's what happens.
yeah.
Like here, like you have Direct TV here, it's a satellite. So, but if you have a company like Xfinity, then that's more so like cable. So you don't have to worry about your signal going out. But
Yeah.
yeah, that sounds like a lot of opportunities there. There's a
No,
lot of opportunity.
yeah, there's definitely a lot of opportunities. Look, I always say, South Africa is one of the more, I don't know what the correct word is so that I don't offend people. But in terms of just Africa, we are probably far more receptive to change. Yeah, maybe that's a better word. South Africans, a lot of people always say that South Africa has been Americanized, if that's even a word, right? So our people are far more really open to different type of ways of doing things. Although we are trying to kind of backtrack in terms of our content, and we are trying to push. We had a guy who was in charge of the SABC, was COO, who came and tried to implement a 90% local content policy. It didn't necessarily work out well, but it was good for South Africa. So I think the one thing that if you are looking to invest in South Africa to do is to come here, and while yes, you are coming from a different country, it's best to come here maybe for 3-4 months and study the people of South Africa, understand who South Africans are, and then maybe perhaps then look into producing content or creating solutions for South Africans. I think that's the one thing that a lot of people come into the country and forget to do, is that they forget that at the end of the day, this thing needs to thrive in South Africa. So you kind of have to, relate your content, your business, your mediums, anything that you are going to be bringing into the country still has to be relevant and relatable to South Africans.
Right. I mean, like for me, just kind of what I would do if I, went there just for some time, I would more so want to get involved and start covering more of what's happening with the land reform issue, the groups like the Black Centric Forum, the BLF, EFF, because even
Yeah,
over here in America, we know who they are. So
yeah, that,
that is a good thing that we actually know who they are, and we definitely want you guys to take your land back. It's time,
yeah.
and I just get excited to see you guys, demanding that. I'm just very happy. So Nicolette, let me ask you another question here about in the area. If you talk to us about the TV show that you host.
I hosted a youth talk show on SABC One called Daily Thetha. Thetha means talk, so it's daily talk, if translated into English.
Okay, and what kind of topics you bring up? Is it targeted to teenage boys and girls? Is it teenage girls? How is that targeted?
So it's part of the SABC education. It's targeted at the youth, primarily 16 to 30. I mean, our youth bracket is very wide. So in as much as, yeah, it's 16 probably to 26, it does transfer to the older generation. But what we really speak about is socioeconomic issues. So depending on, oh yeah, if you want to see a taxi, there's a taxi passing. So if you want to, like, for instance, look at issues around HIV and AIDS, we'll talk about teenage pregnancy, we'll talk about land reform, we'll talk about opportunities for people in the rural areas. I'm just remembering, recapping some of our latest topics. We've done artificial intelligence. I feel like we are more, so here's the other problem that we've got in South Africa. South Africa has very ageism politics, right? So with
Right.
ageism politics comes ageism leadership. So, and I think it's also an African culture or something like that, where your age kind of gives you a certain status. So people expect certain things from you because you're a certain age. And when you're younger, you're expected to listen to the older generation, which is great. But if you're going to represent the voices of the youth, you then need to have somebody who is young, but also not just somebody who's young, who's speaking on behalf of them, but you got to speak to the youth. So what our show does is that it brings in young people and we're having conversation with them specifically. So the show it's a live TV show, and our first segment is we speak to young people in studio. So we'll have a topic. Let's say, for instance, we're talking teenage pregnancy. So we'll have young people in studio, and the first segment of the show, we will discuss with them what are their thoughts, what are their sentiments, what do they think is causing this kind of phenomena in the country. And then after that, we will then go. We've got a field presenter that goes into the streets, and it's a conversation again with more young people. Now more of a mix, because what we do is we go into different areas of the country. And then right after that, we'll then have what we call a case study. So for instance, if you are discussing teenage pregnancy, we'll have maybe some young mothers and some young fathers come onto our set, and we'll have a discussion with them, and then we bounce off other ideas with the in-studio audience. And then right after that, we then have what we call our topic experts. So we'll either have like a social worker, a therapist, whatever is relevant to the topic.
All right, that sounds like a decent show. I remember back in the day, we used to have a show like that called Teen Summit on BET when it was actually black owned. They used to be, Robert Johnson sold it. Now white people own it, and then that's the
Yeah.
first thing they took away was Teen Summit, which was a kind of like a show similar to what you're doing now. And kids need shows like that because, especially in this day and time. But everything you were stating today, definitely, it definitely piqued my interest a lot. Especially when you start mentioning the stocks. I mean, I love that. Stocks
Yeah.
is a beautiful thing. And so let me ask you about that just real quick before we wrap up. The stocks, I deal with TD Ameritrade. Now, can you go through TD Ameritrade to get South African stocks, or you have to go through those companies over there?
So what's that company that you go through?
TD Ameritrade.
I have never heard of it.
Oh, it's a
So I
big
have no
company.
idea. I've never heard of it.
Yeah, look it up.
So
If you
what?
Google it, it'll pop up real quick.
Yeah. Okay, I will do that, but I've never heard of it. I wouldn't know which platforms so I can tell you which platforms we can buy American stocks from, but I wouldn't know what platforms you guys would buy stocks from the JSE. But I'm assuming that there should be platforms that are available to you guys to buy the JSE. So what usually happens is that they will maybe just select a few, maybe an index of our top 40, or what they'll do is they will group it up either in unit trust, in ETFs, or what I mean, they just group stocks up and then call it something, and everybody buys into it. But ultimately, it's just a bunch of individual stocks. So that's what they usually do. Like for instance, for us here in South Africa, we have access to your stock exchange, but not the whole thing. So there's selected stocks that you can buy, and I've seen what they do now is that they will group the FANG stocks together, and then you buy them like as a unit trust or as an ETF. So that I think that's generally what gets done. Yeah.
Okay, so Nicolette, can you tell people how to get to your website and social media in case they wanted to contact you? 'Cause we have a lot of people in South Africa that watch the show.
All right. So my name is Nicolette Machile. You guys can contact me on my email address is me@nicolettem.com. Please, please, please. I am not a financial advisor. I always have to put this disclaimer out, Kellen, because I'm telling you. Oh, here's another opportunity, by the way, that I didn't speak about. Financial advisory in this country is a big thing. Financial literacy and financial education is utmost crucial. We've got a lot of South Africans that are finally starting to realize that they are in charge of their own wealth. So, and in being in charge of your own wealth, obviously, it means that at some level you need to start upping and upskilling yourself in terms of your financial literacy. So, there's a great space in there, especially fintech kind of companies. So, yeah, we would really appreciate a whole lot of those coming through into South Africa. But if you want to contact me, I am at me@nicolettem.com, or you can hit me up on Facebook. It is Financial Literacy with Nicolette Machile. My website is www.nicolettem.com. By the way, Nicolette is one L and two T's.
All right. So make sure, ladies and gentlemen, we'll put in the pinned comment if you want to contact her, ask her some more questions, or maybe you're going to South Africa and want to get involved, or maybe you want to check out her show. Just make sure you go to all the information there. So Nicolette, thank you for joining us on the show today in the wonderful country of South Africa, and you have a great day.
Thank you so much. It's sleepy time for us on the side.
Okay. Yeah, well, have a good
Bye.
night.